My husband said he would help a friend move, when in fact she was his ex-girlfriend, but I sent his things to that tramp's place with a note that said, "Still a good friend." My husband, Paul, 35, and I, 34, have been married for 7 years and together for 10. We don't have children, a mutual decision we made early on in our marriage. We both work full-time, I as a physical therapist, and he as an architect at a firm. On Thursday night, Paul casually mentioned over dinner that his old college friend, Chris, whom I've never met, was moving into a new apartment across town this weekend and needed help. According to Paul, Chris had recently gone through a messy breakup and didn't have many people to turn to. Paul told me he offered to help Chris move all day, Saturday and Sunday. He explained that they would probably be long days since Chris had a lot of furniture and was downsizing from a house to an apartment. So all this involved sorting and heavy lifting. I was a little disappointed because we typically spend weekends together, often hiking in the Columbia River Gorge or trying new restaurants downtown. We both work a lot during the week, so weekends are our time together. But I understood that helping a friend in need is important, so I just asked if he wanted me to come help out too. Paul quickly said no, stating that there wouldn't be enough work to go around and that Chris was embarrassed about her post-breakup state. Something about Paul's response struck me as odd. He seemed insistent that I shouldn't go, but I let it go. I've always tried not to be the distrustful, controlling type of partner, so I planned a weekend alone, catching up on some books and maybe calling a couple of friends to have a Sunday lunch. On Saturday morning, Paul left early and texted me a few times throughout the day with updates, like working really hard and taking a pizza break. Around 9 p.m., he sent a message saying they were still working, but that they were progressing well and that he would probably be late. He didn't get home until almost midnight. Sunday morning was a repeat. He started early with promises to be back by dinner time. Around 4 p.m., I realized I was out of tea, which I like so much, so I decided to make a quick trip to the local supermarket. The supermarket is only 3 kilometers from our house in an area we often visit. And that's when everything fell apart. As I left the supermarket with my shopping bag in hand, I saw Paul's blue Subaru parked in front of a nearby apartment building, a new building that had finished construction only a few months ago. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except that I distinctly remembered Paul telling me that Chris was moving to another district, which is on the other side of the city from where I was. I was momentarily confused when I saw Paul walk out of the front door of the building, carrying what looked like a small bookcase. He was followed by a woman I didn't immediately recognize until she turned around and I could clearly see her face. It was Ross, his ex-girlfriend from high school. I need to give some context here. Paul and Ross dated all through high school and his freshman year of college before breaking up when she transferred to a college on the other side of the country. According to Paul, it was an amicable split because of long distance, but they both moved on. Over the years of our relationship, Ross's name came up a few times, usually when Paul was waxing nostalgic about his hometown or high school days. About 3 years ago, I found out they had reconnected on Facebook. When I asked him about it, Paul insisted they were just catching up as old friends and nothing more. He told me they exchanged a few messages and that was it. When I expressed discomfort with the situation, he assured me he had no feelings for her and that they weren't actively in contact. As far as I knew, that had been it. Yet here he was, helping Ross move into her new apartment after explicitly lying to me about who he was spending the weekend with. I don't know what came over me, but instead of confronting him immediately, I ducked behind a parked SUV and watched. They were laughing together as they re-entered the building. I spent the next few hours in a state of anxiety, alternating between crying and raging. I checked our phone records online and discovered dozens of calls and messages between Paul and a number I didn't recognize over the past few months. I looked Ross up online and confirmed it was likely her number. When Paul finally came home around 8 p.m., I was sitting quietly at the kitchen table. He casually greeted me, mentioned how exhausted he was from helping Chris move all weekend, and opened the refrigerator to grab a beer. I asked him point blank how the move went. He gave me a detailed account of how he helped Chris move furniture, how the apartment was nice but smaller than her old place, and how grateful Chris was for the help. I let him finish his elaborate tale before saying, "That's weird, because today I saw you helping Ross move into her new apartment when I was at the supermarket." The look on his face said it all. He was being caught in a huge lie, and there was no way out. What followed was one of the most painful conversations of my life. After trying to downplay the situation at first, Paul finally admitted that Ross had moved back to Portland about 6 months after her divorce. They had been in regular contact ever since, meeting up occasionally for coffee or lunch. He swore nothing romantic had happened between them, and that he only lied because he knew I would react badly if I knew he was spending time with her. I asked him if he would have been okay with me secretly meeting up with an ex-boyfriend to help him while lying to him about it. He deflected the question by saying it wasn't the same. When I pressed to know why it wasn't the same, he couldn't give me a straight answer. The more we talked, the more his story changed. First, he said they had only reconnected recently. Then he admitted that they had actually been in contact intermittently for years. First, he said they had only met in public places for coffee. Then he admitted they had gone to dinner a few times. Each new confession made him look worse, much worse. He had been systematically lying to me about his relationship with Ross for years. When I asked to see his phone, he hesitated before handing it over. There were no messages from Ross, which I found suspicious given what I'd seen in our phone records. When I pointed this out, he admitted he had deleted his conversations to avoid exactly this kind of misunderstanding. That was the moment I knew our marriage was in serious trouble. We argued until late into the night. He still insisted he loved me and that Ross was just a friend, but he couldn't explain why friendship required so many lies. At one point, he tried to turn the tables on me, accusing me of spying on him and not trusting him. I reminded him that I had found out purely by chance and that his lies were what created the trust issue in the first place. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay awake next to my husband, this man I thought I knew, feeling like I was sharing a bed with a stranger. By morning, I'd made my decision. While Paul was in the shower, I began packing his essential clothes and toiletries into 2 large suitcases. When he came out and saw what I was doing, he started to protest, but I interrupted him. I told him that trust is the foundation of a marriage, and he just destroyed ours. I told him I needed space to think about whether our relationship could be saved and that he needed to leave. He begged me to reconsider, promising to cut off all contact with Ross and go to couples counseling, but that wasn't going to do it now. The calculated nature of his deception, creating a fictitious friend, planning an entire weekend of lies, deleting messages, showed a side of my husband I'd never seen before and never want to see again. I told him he could either take his bags and find somewhere else to stay, or I would leave. After realizing I wasn't going to budge, he finally took his bags and left, saying he was going to his brother's house and we would talk when I calmed down. I spent Monday meticulously packing the rest of his belongings, clothes, books, his vinyl record collection, his video game console. Everything went into boxes. I knew Ross's new address from seeing it at the apartment complex. I contacted a local moving company and paid to have his boxes delivered to her address the next day, with a note that simply said, "Since you're such good friends, you can continue helping each other out. Do not contact me except through my lawyer." I also changed the locks on our house, which I know is legally questionable since we both own the property, but I needed that sense of security. I texted Paul after completing the delivery, telling him that his things were now with Ross and that I hoped he'd respect my need for space by not coming to the house. His response was a torrent of panicked texts and calls, which I ignored. He showed up at the house that night, unable to get in with his key, repeatedly ringing the doorbell. I didn't respond. He eventually left, but at least I know he really did go to his brother's house, for a series of things not worth sharing. It's now been 2 days since I sent his things to Ross's apartment, and I sit here wondering if I overreacted. Part of me feels justified. The level of deception was profound, and the fact that he would spend time with an ex-girlfriend while lying to me about it crossed a huge line for me. But another part wonders if I should have given him a chance to explain himself further, or if we should try counseling before taking such a drastic step. I haven't filed for divorce yet, but I have consulted with an attorney about my options. We live in Oregon, which is an equitable distribution state, meaning our marital assets would be divided fairly, but not necessarily equally, in a divorce. The house was purchased during our marriage with both names on the deed, so that would have to be addressed. We also have joint bank accounts and retirement accounts that would need to be untangled. My friends are divided. Some think I did exactly the right thing, while others think I should at least try counseling before ending a 7-year marriage. My parents, who adore Paul, are urging caution and reconciliation. I'm caught between my pride, which doesn't want to forgive such a betrayal, and my heart, which still loves the man I thought I knew. So, Reddit, what would you do in my situation? Did I overreact by packing up his things and sending them to Ross's house? Update 1. Believe me, I've been reading everyone's advice, although it's been a very busy 3 days for me. And I thank you for everything you've written, because there are so many interesting approaches. I like that concept I wasn't aware of, called the truth in dribs and drabs. What was Paul doing? Telling me things little by little so as not to reveal everything that happened. And like many said, if there was nothing wrong with what he did, there was nothing to hide, and that's a big red flag. But this is what's been happening. The day after I posted, Paul's brother, Mike, called me. Mike and I have always gotten along, and he's generally a straightforward and honest person. He told me that Paul had been staying with him and was completely devastated. He'd already texted me before to let me know he was there, and I believe him. I say this because of things like what I'm about to tell you now. According to Mike, Paul confessed everything to him, and he felt I deserved to know the full truth. Here's what Mike told me. He said that Paul and Ross, in fact, had been in regular contact not just for months, but for years. They never completely disconnected after reconnecting on Facebook 3 years ago. Although Paul insisted to his brother that nothing physical had happened between them, he admitted to Mike that there was an emotional component to their relationship that went beyond a normal friendship. Apparently, Ross had been unhappy in her marriage for a long time before her divorce, and Paul became her confidant and emotional support. Mike said that when he pressed Paul about why he kept the relationship secret, Paul broke down and admitted that he liked the attention and the connection to his past. He said he loved me and that he loved our life together, but Ross represented a what-if scenario that he couldn't let go of. When she moved back to Portland, their communication intensified, and he found himself increasingly caught between his commitment to our marriage and his unresolved feelings for her. I asked Mike why he was telling me all of this, and he said that although he loves his brother, he doesn't condone dishonesty in marriage. He thought I deserved to know the whole truth so I could make an informed decision about our future. He also mentioned that Paul planned to come clean and ask for another chance, and sure enough, later that day, I received an email from him. He had been ignoring my calls and texts. The email was a confession of his ongoing emotional relationship with Ross. He admitted that although they hadn't been physically intimate, their relationship had crossed boundaries that shouldn't be crossed when you're married. He said he'd been projecting, convincing himself that as long as nothing physical happened, he wasn't really betraying me. Now he realized how wrong he was. He also revealed something I didn't know. Apparently, Ross had expressed romantic interest in rekindling their relationship after her divorce, and although Paul claims he told her he was committed to our marriage, he didn't cut off contact like he should have. Instead, he tried to maintain both relationships, which led to the elaborate lies about helping Chris move out. In his email, Paul said he'd been in contact with a therapist specializing in marital counseling and infidelity recovery, and that he was willing to do whatever it took to rebuild trust, if I was willing to try. He said he had told Ross he could have no more contact with her and had blocked her number and social media accounts. He wasn't responding to emails immediately. I needed time to process this new information and figure out what I wanted. The next day, I got a call. It was Ross. She was calling to apologize. She said she had gotten my number from Mike. She said that after receiving Paul's belongings at her apartment, which apparently caused a huge scene with her landlord, she realized the extent of the damage their relationship had done. She confirmed most of what Paul and Mike had told me, that their friendship had crossed appropriate boundaries, but that nothing physical had happened between them. She also admitted that she had hoped they could reconnect romantically after her divorce, but now she felt bad because she thought our relationship was off. Apparently, Paul had been telling her our marriage wasn't quite right, which is also new news to me because I didn't know. I didn't say much during the call. I mostly listened, asking a few clarifying questions every now and then. She seemed genuinely remorseful, but I also sensed she was trying to absolve herself of some blame by making this call. Before ending the conversation, she promised she would respect my marriage and not contact Paul again. Yesterday, I finally agreed to meet Paul at a coffee shop to talk in person. It was intensely difficult to see him. For the first time since this all started, I saw true regret in his expression, not just fear of being found out or losing our marriage. We talked for almost 3 hours. He answered every question I had without getting defensive, took full responsibility for his actions, and didn't try to minimize the damage he'd caused. He admitted he'd been living in a fantasy world where he could have me while also enjoying the ego boost Ross's attention gave him. He said he'd been reading a lot about emotional infidelity and talking to a therapist, and that part of telling Ross our marriage was in trouble was to get her to reach out, and now he recognizes that what he did was absolutely a form of infidelity, even without physical intimacy. When I asked him why I should trust him again, he didn't have a quick answer. He simply said that he knew trust would have to be rebuilt slowly, if at all, and that he was prepared for that process to take years. He said he was willing to be completely transparent from now on, with an open phone policy, location sharing, whatever I needed to feel safe while we worked through this. I told him I wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. The betrayal still feels too fresh, and I'm not sure I could move on. I explained that even if he wanted to try, the road to recovery would be long and painful for both of us, and I needed to be sure I had the emotional energy for that journey. We left things at that. I promised to think about counseling, and he would continue to stay at his brother's house while I decide what I want. So here's where things stand. I've scheduled an appointment with a therapist for myself to help me process everything I've had going on in my head. I haven't decided about marriage counseling yet. The fact that he's kept his cheating secret for so long, getting better and better at lying to my face, terrifies me. How can I be sure he's not lying again in the future? I don't want to spend the rest of my life working as a private detective to make sure he's not doing anything wrong. If I hadn't discovered what I saw, what would have happened? One night, one of us would cross a line, and what if it would be physical infidelity? I'm having a hard time thinking we can come back from this problem. Update 2. I've started seeing a therapist individually, which has been helpful in sorting out everything I've had going on in my head. After much consideration, I agreed to attend a couples counseling session with Paul, just to see if it might be worth continuing to try. A form of exploration to understand all my possibilities. The session was yesterday and was both enlightening and devastating. The therapist has extensive experience in infidelity recovery and created a safe space for both of us to express ourselves. She began by setting some ground rules. No interrupting, no defensive responses, only honest communication. Paul was the first to speak, reiterating his remorse and his desire to save our marriage. He talked about his own insecurities and how reconnecting with Ross had boosted his ego in ways he hadn't been initially aware of. He recounted how one small lie snowballed into bigger lies until he found himself living a double life. When my turn came to speak, I was shocked by the depth of the hurt and anger that came flooding out. I talked about the humiliation of discovering his deception by chance, the countless moments when he looked me in the eye and lied, and the doubts I have about everything right now. Were there other lies I didn't uncover? Other women? How could I ever trust anything he says now? The doctor led us through a discussion about what trust means to each of us and how it might be rebuilt. She was careful not to push for reconciliation, emphasizing that both staying and leaving were valid choices after such a huge betrayal. She gave us some communication exercises to practice and suggested we each spend time reflecting on what we truly wanted for our futures, whether together or apart. I emerged from the session emotionally exhausted, but with a little more clarity. That night, I decided to do something I hadn't done yet. I logged into our shared cloud storage, where we keep important documents and photos. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. I just followed a gut feeling that there might be more to discover in a folder called 2023 Work Projects. I found a subfolder labeled Ross inside, with dozens of photos of them together over the past year, at restaurants, hiking trails, even one of them at what looked like a concert with his arm around her shoulders. Nothing explicitly sexual, but certainly not the casual, sporadic coffee meetings he'd initially described. I could also see a few text conversations where they discussed their feelings for each other. Although they never explicitly mentioned a physical relationship, the emotional intimacy was unmistakable, with messages like, "I can't stop thinking about seeing you yesterday, and no one understands me like you do." The dates and times of these photos and messages revealed that they had been meeting regularly during the period Paul claimed they had minimal contact. Several of the encounters occurred on days when he had told me he was working late or meeting with male friends. The carefully hidden folder also suggested premeditation, which contradicted his story that a small lie snowballed. I called Paul immediately, and when I told him what I had found, there was a long silence before he simply said, "I was going to tell you about that." I asked him when exactly he planned to share this information, given that he'd had multiple opportunities to be completely honest. He didn't have a good answer. I ended the call and emailed the therapist to cancel our next couples session, explaining what I had discovered. Later that evening, Paul sent a long message, apologizing again and saying he'd been working up the courage to reveal everything at our next therapy session. He said he was afraid of overwhelming me with too much information at once. At this point, his explanations just sounded like more manipulation to me. This morning, I contacted my lawyer again and officially began the divorce process. Oregon is a no-fault divorce state, so emotional infidelity doesn't significantly impact the legal proceedings, but documenting the timeline of the cheating could be relevant to the negotiations over our assets. Paul has been calling and texting constantly since I informed him of the divorce. In his messages, he asks for another chance, and when I don't respond, he gets angry that I'm not even trying to save our marriage. I've been mostly ignoring them, answering only practical questions about the logistics of separating our lives. The divorce process has begun, and I'm focusing on the practicalities, separating finances, making plans for the house, and thinking about the next steps. Update 3. I didn't expect to have to update so soon. I expected to update after the divorce. But something happened yesterday. The divorce process had barely begun. My lawyer had drafted the initial documents, and we were scheduled to discuss the division of assets later. This week, Paul had been relatively quiet for the past 2 days, occasionally sending a few messages asking me to reconsider, but less frequently than before. Yesterday afternoon, I was leaving my appointment with the therapist when I saw a familiar car in the parking lot, Ross's red Toyota that I had seen at her apartment building. She saw me immediately and called out my name. My first instinct was to ignore her and walk away, but curiosity got the better of me. We ended up sitting on a bench outside the therapy office because she asked if we could talk. What followed was one of the most surreal conversations of my life. She told me that after our phone call last week, she had been struggling with guilt over her role in the breakup of my marriage. She claimed that although she had genuine feelings for Paul, she had realized that their relationship was based more on nostalgia and fantasy than reality. Then came the bombshell. Ross confessed that, contrary to what she and Paul had previously said, their relationship had become physical about 4 months ago. According to her, it happened after they ran into each other at a mutual friend's birthday party, a party that Paul had told me was a work event. They had both been drinking, ended up talking for hours about their pasts, and eventually went over to her apartment. She said that after that night, they met several more times, usually during those so-called work nights, or when Paul said he was out with friends. She showed me text messages on her phone confirming these encounters, explicit messages that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. I asked her why she was telling me this now, since it wasn't going to do much to change things. She said that after receiving Paul's belongings at her apartment and our subsequent phone conversation, Paul proposed that they officially start dating, since my marriage was clearly over. But she told him no because it left her feeling used and discarded. When she spoke to me, she realized he had been lying to both of us, which is when he told her our marriage was practically over and he was just waiting for the right time to leave. He gave her the impression that we were barely more than roommates. Ross apologized for her role in the affair, but made it clear that her confession wasn't purely altruistic. She wanted me to know exactly who Paul was and what he had done in case I decided to go back to him. Ross didn't know I was filing for divorce. When I finally got home, I forwarded screenshots of the texts Ross had sent me to Paul. "Is there anything else I should know?" His response was immediate, a phone call I reluctantly took. Paul was devastated, alternating between anger at Ross for exposing him and frantic apologies to me. He confirmed that the physical affair had happened as Ross described it, but claimed it had ended weeks ago when he realized how much he was risking. When I asked him why he hadn't revealed this during his supposedly full confession, he said he feared it would be the final straw that would make a reconciliation impossible. I jokingly think it scares me how Paul's trickle-down truths keep getting worse. I don't know what I might discover later. As a safety precaution, I've decided to get tested for STDs. I don't want to wait to find out I have something and have him tell me. I was just afraid that would be it. News for you, Paul. Our marriage is dead and well buried. I told Paul that the divorce would go ahead as planned, and that his continued dishonesty only confirmed that I was making the right decision. I also told him that all future communication would have to go through our lawyers, as I no longer trusted anything he could tell me directly. After we hung up, I called my lawyer to update her on the situation, and this morning I received an email from Paul. Despite my request that he only contact me through legal channels, he sent a long message expressing deep remorse. He felt and recognized that he had destroyed everything good in his life through selfishness and cowardice. He said he would not contest anything in the divorce and would accept any terms I considered fair. He also said he would begin intensive individual therapy to address his issues with honesty and commitment. The email ended with him saying that, although he knew our marriage was over, he hoped that one day I could find it in my heart to forgive him, not for his sake, but for my own peace of mind. He said he would always regret being the fool who threw away the best thing that ever happened to him. I haven't responded to the email and I don't plan to. I don't want to forgive him or whatever. He's not going to have a relationship with me like the one he had with Ross. Don't even dream about it. But strangely, knowing about the physical affair has given me a kind of closure. I no longer wonder if I overreacted. The situation is now crystal clear, and so is my path forward. I have decided to accept a temporary position at my company's Seattle office while my divorce progresses. The 3-month assignment will give me some physical distance from this city and all the painful memories here. My therapist thinks something like this could be positive. As for the house, I've decided to let Paul buy me out if he wants to keep it. The idea of him living there with all our memories doesn't bother me as much as I expected. In fact, I don't want to live with those memories. Update 4. To start, my test results came back negative, and I have nothing else to worry about. I haven't discovered any more things about Paul's infidelity in these months, at least not worse than what I already know. Just small details of his affair, which he initially called sentimental, when, in reality, the only sentimental thing about it all was how sad his lies were, because of how sad they were. I finally accepted a permanent position after a few months in Seattle, as the change of scenery felt quite good. I continue to have sessions with my therapist virtually. The divorce has been perfect, aside from the fact that it's a divorce. We were able to divide everything without too much trouble, and Paul found the money to buy out my share of the house and leave that behind. Some things I still know about the city are that Ross has moved from there. Apparently, she has also accepted a new job in another state and saw this as an opportunity to leave. It's as if Paul's two romantic interests are running away from him. But I know that in my case, it's not like that. I just needed a new place to start over. At this point, my interest in that man is zero. Still, I do occasionally have contact with his brother Mike, who, before you suggest it again, is not someone I'm romantically interested in. He's married, and unlike Ross, I wouldn't be with a man even if he had problems in his marriage. Anyway, Mike doesn't have them either. He's only given me brief updates on Paul where he says he's very depressed. He said he is seeing a professional regularly but still feels bad. I'd like to say it's all to boost my already battered ego, but we all know why Paul is sad. I just wanted to tell you everything I know and not hold anything back. I'm also using this post to say goodbye, if it is the last one, which seems to be the case.